Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah. We had a text from Armstrong, the brand Armstrong last week, that you were in Europe.
Yeah.
You did a competition. We will talk about that later on. In France, I guess.
Yeah, in France, yeah.
So, and you are coming to Sweden. And we have never spoken before. Not connected. I know we have been connected with Jens a little bit on Instagram. Yeah. But I've just heard your name and seen you on Instagram for sure. So there was something about the name. Tell us about the Oskar Johansson.
Oskar Johansson.
Yeah.
So my father's Swedish. So he's born in Holm, nära Halmstad. So when he was 21, I think he had to do the compulsory military service. And after that, he was a ski bum. So I think he started doing seasons in Europe and eventually went to the US and did, I think, 8 seasons in total between the US and Europe. And then also in the southern hemisphere winter, he used to go to New Zealand. And he was his visa ran out and he had to just do a quick jump to Australia for 2 weeks to get a new visa and never left. Met my mum and that was it. So yeah, we have all our families from between Halmstad, Helsingborg, even Tvååker. So we used to come back every sort of second year just to visit family and hang out. And we sort of, we grew up surfing, so we always came back going, oh yeah, we want to check it out for surfing. And I think the last time I was here, my uncle took me to A-Bay. Yeah. And we were sort of looking out there, and there was all the windsurfers out, and there was a couple sup guys, and so it was pretty cool to see that. And we were sort of like, oh, maybe we could surf there, maybe there. And whereas now coming back, this is my first time back with foiling, and it's it's a new playground. There's so much to do.
Playground. So. I mean, I've been looking for more waves and more wind for 40 years.
Yeah.
And then we finally get something we can play with so many days.
Yeah.
And Thursdays, of course, the winging came here, and now that you can ride bumps in so tiny with the downwind. So we'll talk about that. But also, so your connection to Sweden is your father, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you have been here as a kid, you were here visiting
a
family
lot,
and friends.
Yeah.
And then you also have another connection to Sweden, I heard yesterday.
I do. My girlfriend's Swedish. So she was on holidays in Sydney, exactly the same as my dad.
Story.
Yeah. So she came for 3 months, and we met sort of through friends, and she ended up staying for the whole year. And then when her visa ran out, we both, because of my dad, I got a Swedish passport, so we both moved back to Stockholm for a year just to do the visa stuff and sort all that out. And so now she lives with me in Sweden, in Sydney, but my dad never taught me any Swedish.
No way.
Never. He said sort of like actually the first time I met, her name's Cornelia, I asked my dad, because the only words we knew was like, hur mår du? And I knew it was like very formal, how are you? So I was like, how do you say like, how are you going? Like a bit more casually, because we're going, as like our first date. And he's like, oh yeah, say this, jag get caught. So I met her, I was like, went on our first date, and I was like, Shanna, I was like, jag get caught. And she just looked at me like, what?
No way.
And she laughed, and she's like, who told you that? I was like, oh, my dad. And she's like, yeah, fair.
Your dad.
That's a good one, right?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, so, but we've seen you up there. You have amazing style when you prone foil. Downwind probably, definitely too, when I saw you the last 2 days ago. You probably did something. You talked about surfing.
Yeah.
So when did you start surfing?
I started when I was young, probably 3 or 4 years old. We sort of started getting pushed into waves and started learning. Where we lived in Sydney, we were about half an hour from the beach. Like we were a little bit further, we weren't like close. So we mostly just surfed in the school holidays if we went up or down the coast. And then probably when I was like 16, once I could drive, I just drove every day to the beach. So I really got into surfing a little bit later on. And then same, we have a house about 3 hours south of Sydney, and it's, for surfing, is just a mecca. It's got some of the best waves around. It's very heavy water, very like slabby, a lot of barrels. So that's kind of the style of surfing I got into. I think as much as foiling foiling's amazing, but you can't replace getting barreled. No. That's the one. Everything else, I feel I'd rather foil these days, but if it's barreling, I'm surfing. Yeah, no question. Sure. So
no, it's definitely something special with surfing. So that's where your style come from, for sure, a little bit.
Yeah.
You have
I think I think snowboarding has a big influence on foiling. It has a similar, more with the carving, I think, on an open face. You don't get that. Like surfing very much is in the pocket. It's much closer to the energy source. Whereas when you're on an open wave, I feel a little more like snowboarding, especially in powder. So,
but I've seen a lot of snowboarders which are foiling and they don't have any style.
Oh, really?
But I've seen a lot of good surfers and they have style.
Yeah.
So you can compare it a little bit, but I think if you are a really good surfer, because it's really hard to get to be a stylish good surfer.
Yeah, definitely.
And, but snowboard is pretty easy. It's 1 week in the slopes. Good.
Yeah.
No, not really, but kind of. Okay, I have some questions here. So actually, how did you get into foiling? When did it start?
It was during COVID. At the time we were living in Sydney, and once we got locked down, we decided to move to my parents' house down the coast. And I kind of knew a lot of the local surfers down there. And one of them was a pro bodyboarder. And I think GoFoil had sent him a bunch of gear to try out. So he kind of convinced me. He's like, oh, let's come out and we'll try it. And he had a big board, big foils, and I got a moment, I sort of paddled in on a wave, it was all prone, and I got like a glimpse of like maybe 5 meters of glide, like actually on foil, and it was like, switch went off. So I went and bought a Nash, it was one of the Nash Thrusts, the original foils, and I took probably about a week to really get comfortable with paddling and getting to my feet, and then quickly after I learned I could pump to one more wave, but with the old foils, it was, you pumped to one wave and you were just so tired. And I actually stopped. I just went, oh, this is, like, what's the point? I didn't understand that you could turn, and every time I'd kick off pump, I was just so tired. And I was like, this is pointless. So I stopped for quite a while. I stopped for probably a year and a half. And then a friend or someone knew that I could at least get onto my feet and foil, and he sort of said, oh, look, I've got a friend coming down. He's a team rider for Axis. It was Jeremy Wilmot, who's at Ocean Pixels on Instagram. And he's like, come for a session with him. Like, it'd be good and all this. And I was like, I don't really enjoy this. I was like, nah. He's like, come. So eventually I was like, okay, all right, I'll come. And I saw him on his first wave. He rode it like a shortboard. And it was like, he's 6'7", 100 kilos. And he's on a wave this big, riding it like a shortboard. And ever since that moment, that was like the first, that's what I want to do. And ever since that, I went home and immediately just cut my tail down. I was like, he told me everything to do. He's like, do this, cut this. And I shaped my first board. I just went in crazy with it. And ever since that, I think I definitely foil now a lot more than I surf. And that was the moment where I was just like, this is cool.
And how is the condition in Australia where for surfing and proning and?
In Sydney, it's tricky just with the number of people. So there's a few spots that are kind of foil spots in Sydney, and you go out there on a regular day and there's 30 to 40 foilers out. But then down where we live, there's just so many waves. So you're in the water every day. There's always something to ride. And I think from surfing, you do get days where the swell's a bit too small or the wind's the wrong direction, but with foiling, this is always a reason to get in the water. You can't not get in the water. So.
And you can use all those swell and beaches or break when you don't surf.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, we are in Layet where you have been. Yeah. It's a little bit slow. It's good for longboarding. Windsurfing is slow. For foiling is amazing.
Yeah.
It's one of the best places I can imagine.
I think that's why there's certain parts of, especially the west coast of the US, where they just don't have enough waves, so they sort of overlap a bit much. But I think in general, the waves you want to surf as the waves you want to foil are totally different. Yeah. It's like where we are, there's no overlaps. A lot of the surfers now foil just because instead of, say, surfing 200 days of the year, now you're every day. You can always go out. Yeah. And I think that's probably for me what foiling was so good, is there's always a reason to get in the water. I think now the hardest part is trying to choose what to do, because you go out there and it's good wind and you're like, oh, I could go winging or I could go downwinding, or some other side is good for proning. So it's like the constant FOMO of am I doing the best option? Like you've always got a reason to get in the water, which I think that's the best part.
It's like since foil we're coming into this shop and this business, I work is twice as much.
Yeah.
It's like full on and it's happening so much, and I love it, so I really want to do it. Even I'm squeezing in, time early, middle of the day, less time at the office, and it's so many days you can be in the water, which are really nice. But you really, for us to sell it, it takes a lot of. If you want to do the right thing and sell the right products, it's really you need to know what you're doing, definitely. That's the question. And you love foiling. You loved foiling. You still love foiling. And how come? And then how did you come up? Then you work in the industry, team rider and stuff like that. How did that start?
It sort of all came about. I did a review of it was when the Armstrong's first HA high aspect foil came out. It was the 1125. And I did a video. I had a friend who was in the US who was kind of going through a hard time. And it was during COVID, and I sent him a video, and I was like, man, like, wait till you get home. Like, foiling's insane. You'll love it. And I just filmed it while I was riding, and I was like, oh, dude, you're going to love this. Like, it's so good and all this stuff. And he sort of said to me, he's like, dude, that was the best video. Like, that was so fun. So I was like, when the new HA came out, I was like, oh, I'll try and film a review in the same way. Like, while I'm riding, talk about what I'm feeling and all that sort of stuff. And so I did that at first, and Armstrong saw it, and they were like, oh, like, this is really good. Like, if you want to do more reviews, we'll send you gear. And it was the same. There was a few other brands like Axis, Unifoil, F1 that started, I think one of the hardest things with working in the industry is being able to give feedback that engineers and developers can translate. There's so many guys that go, oh, hey, this is the best foil ever. And you're like, oh, what's good about it? Oh, it fucking turns sick. And you're like, all right. Like, you kind of need to be able to translate what you're feeling and all those sensations. And yeah, I guess I worked well with Axis, Armstrong, and those other brands, and they were happy with my feedback with developing foils. And eventually it just got to the point where they kind of all said, you've got to choose one. And it kind of, eventually, it was Armstrong. One of the things, they brought me to Hood River about 2 years ago, and I met Army for the first time, and he just, the first thing he said to me was like, how was your flight? I was like, good. And he was like, don't talk shit about any other brand. He's like, everyone's making really good gear, and we're all learning from each other, and we're trying the hardest. And he's like, you're not a team rider yet for us. And it was a bit of a test for me on that trip with them, and he's just like, just have respect for everyone. And I met up with a couple of the other brands, I won't say who, and the first thing, I was coming out of the water with an Armstrong setup, and they were dead serious. It was one of the owners, and he's just like, why are you still riding that shit for? And it was the first time I was like, nah. Like, it made my decision really clear, and I'm very into the details, and I think foils are expensive. Like, for me, I was at university. It was a big financial investment to select one brand. And so I have a lot of, when people send me messages, I have a lot of time for people to recommend it, because they're spending a lot of money on gear, and if it's not quite right for them, I think it's really important to be told or given the correct information to buy the right gear. And that was where Armstrong, for me, was just that balance of, incredible quality, but also their gear was designed for what I wanted as well. So, and that's why I've always, with my reviews, I've always tried to be as honest as I can. I don't want to, I was just talking with someone earlier about the downwind boards. I was, when I did my review of the downwind boards, I was like, wow, this is so much easier to paddle up and get on foil, but they suck to turn. And everyone else just went, nah, this is the best board, it does everything. I'm like, no, it doesn't surf. It turns terribly. If you want to turn well, ride a smaller sup. And that's where you got to be honest. And a lot of people just go, oh, so-and-so said it was the greatest ever, so we bought it. And then they ride and they're like, oh, it doesn't really turn, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't suit my brand foil or whatever. And I think you just need to be honest with everyone. And it works. Armstrong they're very appreciative that I'm honest. One of the things in my contract is that they have no say over any of my reviews or anything that I do. And that's, to them, they see it as a positive, because if someone buys a downwind board thinking it's going to do everything, and it doesn't, ultimately the customer's just annoyed. Whereas if you tell them it's great for paddling, you get up easier, it's great for downwinding, but it doesn't surf as well, then they're aware of the pros and cons. And foiling's just, it's full of pros and cons. Or it doesn't matter what, everything, whatever you do, there's always a con to it. And so that's where you just need to be honest with those, and I think that just makes it a bit more transparent, and people don't just waste money buying pointless gear, which you probably don't want to hear. You want to sell more gear.
Ask the customers here. I'm definitely not that kind of guy.
Yeah, good.
I'm definitely, you're going to have the right gear. And no, I don't push that. I mean, what we are talking about here, the whole thing about, they think that it's selling, but what we're talking about here is to have a really good experience, have a relationship with the customer, and finally, when they need something to make the experience better on the water, we hopefully one of the companies they're going to choose to buy that thing, so they have a good experience. So when people are starting here in the season, we have 3 days, we're working and education stuff, and then a lot of people think, we're going to sell more. People coming here to buy a surfboard, and they look in the custom CJ Nilsson for 16,000 kroner, and Janne tell them that, okay, it's a really nice board, but for you when you start, this one NSP for 6,000 is actually better shape for you.
Yeah.
And they need to tell them that.
Yeah.
But if you really love that one, it will work because it's really nice and have the right brand for sure. But this is a better product.
Yeah.
So this is a process that I've done since I started, kind of normally, because I'm so into that they get the customer get the right gear.
Yeah.
It's so many. When the really small board came in winging, I was like, nah, I need to have a 40 liter. Do you really? So I don't know. But it's their decision here to say if I'm telling the truth. But I think I am actually. So it's a very important thing. Very important. And then, of course, we're talking about now reviews. You do a lot of prone surfing.
Yeah.
You come into downwind foiling a little bit later, I guess, or sup foiling at the same time.
Yeah. So I never supped. I don't have a background in any
downwind supping.
No,
like James Casey.
No. I've never ridden. The first sup I ever rode was a foil sup.
Yeah.
Same thing, I saw James Casey at the time doing it, and I was like, oh, I really want to do that. And there was another guy, Zane Westwood, who James had was his protege that he'd kind of been bringing up. And I knew Zane really well. He kind of was one of the first guys that got me into foiling. So he took me on my first run. It was on I think it was a 6.1 or something like that by 29 wide. It was super wide, super big. And he kind of taught me the basics of paddling. I think I paddled around in a lake at first, my first time I just went in circles. So I realized I was like, all right, I need to learn to paddle straight first. I spent 2 sessions just in a lake just learning to paddle straight, and then went into the surf just to learn trying to transition from paddling to foiling. I think once you catch the wave, my big thing's been making sure the mast is in a position where you stand when you're paddling is the same position that when you stand when you're on foiling. To me, guys talk about they shuffle forward or shuffle back, but that transition's already hard enough. So if you can just be in the same position, it just reduces the variables that you need to change. So I kind of I'd catch a few waves and just work out where to put my mast and where it felt comfortable, and then that took about another week, and then after that I tried my first run, which was in a bay run, sort of really strong wind, but just very small, organised bumps. And Zane just sort of taught me that rhythm, the kind of which bump to paddle for and when to paddle. And I kind of got up then, and then after that, we just went straight to 30-kilometre ocean runs. And Straight to,
With that 6.1 board?
It was small. By that time, I made my own board. So I had to go on that first one, which was one of Zane's boards. And then I made my own board, which at the time was 5'11" by 22. And James Casey called me as soon as I made it. He's like, you screwed it. He's like, it's not going to work. And all his boards were 29 at the time. He's like, nah, you went too narrow. You won't be able to stand on it. It won't work. And I was like, oh, maybe it'll work. And I was like, and then the first run, it worked really well. And then all his boards were 22 after that. And then my second board, I made 19, and he called me like, mate, you cooked it. Like, what have you done? And I was like, oh, like, maybe it'll work. And same thing, then all his boards were 19. So it was, you know, I think being able to, like, I all grew up shaping surfboards. So it was shaping my own foil boards was a natural progression. And it meant at the time, you know, things were evolving so fast, especially with downwind boards.
Yeah, but how did you, I mean, for me, it's, I mean, the swing weight, you talk about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when you're doing downwind, you were really, the downwind board you have is somewhere around, but we can have a look at that later. But for me, the swing weight, from I started, you know, light wind winging and sup foiling, the swing weight is not a big thing because you have a carving bottom turn and a carving top turn. Surfing is a carving bottom turn and a snappy top turn. Same wind surfing. So you need to have really low swing weight. A huge difference. To have a 7.0 surfboard, 6.0 surfboard. Yeah. But to have that in foil, it doesn't matter. But the roll weight. Like you are like discover yourself, kind of.
Yeah.
Because that, if you're under 22 and down, that's the thing. If it's 7, 6.5, 6.73, if you have something which are wide, it doesn't work anyway. Because it's roll weight and you need to pull it up again when you're so connected with the foil. So wow, so you really kind of discover that for yourself.
And it was, you know, I think when you're paddling to catch a wave, you have such a minute opportunity to get on foil. You're waiting for that bump to go, and you've got 2 to 3 strokes where you know either yes, I'm getting up, or no, I'm not. And ultimately, the more drag you have at that size, I think the only reason we were going narrow was for it to be easier to get on foil. It would cut through the water, it would get up easy. And then also when you're sort of touching down, working it up, it's less surface area. So that were the only reasons we were going narrower, but at the same time we were learning how that width was affecting the roll. So, and I think a lot of that has then translated into the wing boards, like the mid-length stuff now. And so I think at first, a lot of the brands were very hesitant on developing downwind boards purely because they're like, why, like 0.05% of the market downwind foils. Like you look at the sort of triangle, you've got, you know, downwind foiling, prone foiling. That prone foiling, like globally, accounts for like 3% of the market. It's useless. But then as you work down, you've got like dock starting and wake foiling is like 20-30% of the market, like 60% is wing foiling. And so they're like, why would we develop downwind boards for the 0.5% at the top? But what we learned from that, and what then, you know, the light wind winging ultimately funded downwinding. Like no brand is making money out of downwind foiling. They're making money out of wingers that use them for light wind winging.
For sure.
And that development is what ultimately, like trying these new different shapes is what we then learn that then progressed into the mid-length boards. And the same, the prone boards now, everything that we've learned to the extremes of downwind boards is then being seen in all the other disciplines, all the other boards. So although some brands kind of went, no, I think so much of what we've learned has come from those boards, which is, it's cool to see.
I hope I will see the start board will be kind of a hybrid downwind board shape, 125, 120 liters, 140 liters, and then you can use it later in light wing or SUP or whatever. If you buy a beginner board now, 120, 130 liters, it's big and wide and fat, and you can never turn it. It's like boom, boom.
So, and I think that it's tricky when you want to bring people into the sport, and to tell someone, oh hey, you need to buy a $3,000 board, but you're only going to use it for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then you need to get a new $3,000 board, and then you'll progress, and you need to get a mid-length and a sinker and it's just like, I mean, for most guys, it's so much money, and they're just like, whereas if you can make sort of a hybrid board that has a long-term use, then
I think it will come.
Yeah.
They haven't really. Sometimes they're a little bit late, the brands. I mean, even in that purpose, It was just, I bought some custom apple trees last year when I saw this downwind thing for winging. And I got them, tried them, and it was like, whoa, so easy. I never, I didn't care about how much wind it was, and I can be out on the water so many times. And I had to be kind of a kite school. And they didn't foil, but they wanted to learn. So I had 2 days in Gotland with them. And the second day, two guys, and the second day I'm about to take my 1150 axis. It was super light, 10 knots, and then the downwind board, and they just glide like that, boom, and they were like, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and on the beginning board, 140 liters, it was stuck, and it was like really like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that was actually the question. So, how come you started with the competition? Was that something when you get a sponsorship or relationship with Armstrong?
Yeah. So it came out of, I did the, well, it was actually the longest pump in the surf for. It was Adam Bennett's came down to stay with me, and he was, I like Adam, a really good friend. I've known him for a long time, and he was sort of, it was the first time that he had a sponsorship with Flight that was paying him good, like enough money that he could move to foiling full time. And he was so like, oh, I'm a pro foiler now, and I was like, oh, fuck. And like we went for a surf, like he said it like 4 times before he got into the surf, and it just annoyed the shit out of me. I was like, fuck. And it was like just after that he released his like, oh, I've got the pump world record for the longest time riding waves. I think it was 1 hour and 6 minutes. And like at the moment, I think he left, and that weekend I was like, fucking, I'm gonna beat you, like. And I went out and yeah, I beat him. And then I think Armstrong at the time they were really, they were happy with it, and they kind of said, oh look, we've got, you've obviously got decent fitness, like why don't you try and do the Molokai to Oahu race? And that was, I think, maybe it was early, like January, they kind of asked if I wanted to do it, and I kind of...
Which year? That
was last year, so 2023. And so I sort of, my sisters, I have a twin sister as well, she's a pro triathlete, and I kind of knew, I just assumed it was going to be very endurance based, and so I kind of started doing a lot more training with her, and she kind of just, helped me with all the training side of things. And so I did my first race, was the Maui to Molokai, which I had a shocking race. I like missed the start. I assumed it was everyone paddles out together, it's just relaxed, we all start together, wait for the thing, and like I was halfway paddling out talking to someone, and the gun went off and everyone was gone, and I was just like, what the fuck's going on? And so yeah, I still did well. I think I got 7th in that, and then it made me kind of realize what I needed to work on. And so then we did the Molokai to Oahu for the first time, which last year was a very different format. It was a flat water start, and you have to pump out to the wind, and then you can kind of downwind. Whereas this year, it was totally different. You started out in the bumps. So last year just had a bit of a different, you chose a foil that you could flat water start and that you could pump a long way out and get into the wind. Whereas this year you kind of just started in the wind bumps. It was a very different race. And so yeah, I did fairly well that year. So Armstrong were kind of happy to keep me going with doing the races. I'm not naturally a super competitive person. I foil because I love it, not because I am competitive. But on the ski or the levels, a lot of the top guys now are just incredibly competitive and very focused, whereas I'm a bit more, hey, just have some fun. And so it's sort of, how long I keep racing, I'm not sure. It's the seriousness of it is kind of killing a lot of the fun. And I think the way races are like where the foils are now, it's just a straight pump race, really. You get a little boost from a wave and you just pump to the next one, boost, pump, and you just kind of do that for 60 kilometers, and it's not a whole lot of fun anymore, which I think it's an interesting time in the sport. I think the downwinding still is probably the most adventurous side of foiling. You can, like we did, you guys had never done that run we did the other day. You can look at wind direction, you can plan, where to start. You have no idea. The whole run, the wind might change. A certain section might have reverb, and you got to deal with that. And that kind of adventure of trying new conditions, new runs is kind of the fun of it for me. But just pumping the whole way downwind is not super fun.
When you cheat, you were just laughing and turning like surfing.
Yeah, and I think the bumps that I assumed when we paddled out, I just didn't think there would be, it's not really, the wind's coming from down south, it's not really ocean swells coming in. So I said to you, same thing, I was like, I'd put on a big foil, like it could be very slow wind bumps. So if you're doing runs in like the bay runs, the bumps are moving slow. So you need something that can just stay with those bumps. And you always want to pair a foil with the speed of the bumps. But when we got out there, there were large bumps moving. Like there was definitely two obvious swells. There was sort of the wind swell that was kind of moving a little bit offshore. And then there was quite a strong swell that was coming from a lot further away, that once you tapped into one of those, I was on an 880, and that was way too slow. Like I could on a few, I could get into them, but a lot of the time I was having to peel back.
If you would choose, what size of foil would you have? From Armstrong?
680.
A normal H8?
Probably, only because it could sit with the smaller wind swells. I wouldn't have to pump between. The larger swells, the larger the swells are, they're usually further apart, and so you have longer time between them. So you need something that you can, if you're not on one of those swells, you can't just pump and wait for another one. You kind of need something where you can ride the wind energy to get to recover, and then once those big ones come, you want something that's fast enough to still get into that. So it's a balance. If you're doing a pure bay run that just has one wind swell, then you just want, it's a bit easy. You can ride one foil that will suit those conditions. But generally, I mean, back home, we've probably usually got 3 to 4 different swells in the mix, and you can feel each swell, each direction, and you'll find every run, you'll find a new rhythm. So like when we were there was the ground swell was generally pushing quite straight north to south, and then there was a wind swell that was had a little more east in it. It was pushing out.
A little bit offshore.
Yeah, so if you found one of the larger ground swells, you could run with that, and then if it moved under you, you then relied on that sort of east swell to like glide off the back, ride with it, and then sit into the next one.
I didn't
and then
really think about it, but I was using it for sure. When you can feel those small ones coming, you can see them coming behind you,
and you find a rhythm between them. And once at first you're just looking for a rhythm that allows you to stay on foil and you're not getting out of breath. So you're looking for some like recovery. And then eventually you start to look for, doing turns. Like if you ride one back, it'll give you a line to a particular one, then you can turn on that one. And you try and find a rhythm with turning as well. So
that was the first time I discovered that when I sheeting with the wing, relaxed a little bit, just, relax, and went back in the rhythm. It took me a while sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I was so in the rhythm, it was like a flow, and I was connecting. Okay, I need to pump, connecting, and then when I sheeting, it feels like I didn't have the foot's on the right position. I need to dial in. Yeah. So
every time you get up, you might be in a different, like when you're with say like one swell train, we call it. So it's like there's usually 3 to 4 bumps that all move together. If you paddle in on the first one, it's a different rhythm than if you paddle in on the last one. So every time you get up, it's a little bit chaotic. You're just pumping, trying to just get into something, and then eventually you find one, you're like, all right, here we go. And then you start to see what's going on, you find the rhythm, and then you can move. So it's every time you get back up, it takes you 30 seconds to kind of find that rhythm.
Now we're talking about the competition and with Armstrong, and how is your life as a foiler? Are you traveling a lot or is it,
Yes, I'm at the moment probably 4 months of the year I'm sort of traveling. It's not my full-time job. I work as a geospatial developer, which is IT stuff. And my work's, they're comfortable with me to travel and work remotely. So it's a tough balance. It's definitely, last year when I was in Europe, I was working the whole time. So you've got 3 a.m., 2 a.m. meetings and trying to compete at the same time. And, it's a tough balance. But I think it's, the experiences you have is worth it. It's, I get to come to all these amazing places. For me, all the experiences of what it's about, because I'm not the fiercest competitor, that my results aren't what drives me. It's more about the coming to Sweden and downwinding, in Sweden was the highlight of my trip so far. So it's sort of that, to me, the experiences of what it's about. It's same as surfing at the moment. There's not a heap of money in the industry. I mean, as much as the gear is insanely expensive, a lot of brands are struggling. There's a heap of contracts getting cut, and a lot of brands aren't making a lot of money. So it's a tough industry to make a living out of. And I think for me anyway, I'm much more into the development of gear and understanding, the development cycle on a foil realistically is more like a year and a half. Armstrong's at the moment is the only brand that has their own tooling shop, factory, like they've got 4 factories, a tooling shop. So say with F1 or Axis, when we had to get, say if we got a prototype, we were looking at almost 2-month turnaround to get a second prototype, because you need to get the molds shipped to a tooling shop. They can recut the molds, get them back to you, and that was about a month turnaround. Then you need the factory to get back to the factory that's doing the layups. They do the layups. That takes 2 weeks. Then they can start shipping once they're dried. So you're looking at a 2-month turnaround just to do 1 iteration on a prototype. Armstrong, with their own factories, we can cut a mold overnight, and we can get, within a week, we can do a full prototype cycle. So it just meant that working with them, it was just, say with these HAs, we were on the 5th mold, 4th iteration. So probably, almost 20 to 25 iterations on the one foil. Whereas Axis with, say, I was involved with the Spitfires and the ART V1s, and we only had the chance, with the timeline, we only had a chance for 1 iteration. So it was being able to work with them, and I think this is what I'm getting at, but it ties in with working with a particular brand. If most riders are signing 1, max 2-year contracts, and if your development cycle is a year and a half on one product, you don't have the chance to have good input and then actually ride those products and really see the results of them. So for me, I'm not, because I have my regular work, I'm not financially driven by the product. I'm much more interested in developing a quality product that I'm comfortable in recommending and sort of promoting. So, and that's where my interest is. I just love geeking out on the little, different tails, little tuning, shims, all that sort of stuff. And so that's kind of why I haven't tried to, I guess, go full time with any one brand and then start every year or 2 hunt around for new contracts with whoever's got the most money. So that's probably where
you have a good relationship.
Yeah.
I was like, Armstrong, he was here a couple of years ago, called me up and said, I'm going to travel to Sweden, I've seen your shop, I've seen what you're doing, I really want to see if we can do something together. So he stayed at my house, we had a really good time. I mean, the guy has some amazing energy and so much fun to hang out with. Yeah. And if it was like 6, knots in the wind, we're like, oh look, I think we can do it. I think we can do it. Okay, I'm going kiting and foil kiting, and then we didn't have a lot of wind, so I didn't try anything. I don't know if Oskar tried, maybe, but it was from the outside. It was a lot of shimming. It was like everything is like carbon. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, definitely.
And they didn't have a wing. They had a wing then, but it was not very good. It was not a good one. So I was like, oh, okay. And then we had Axis and other brands that I'm sorry, but I think the market is too small to have two really good brands and high-end brands. So let's talk later. And then me and Patrick went to Germany on a foil festival. And then we tried all the other brands we don't have, like F1, Armstrong, Core. If there were a brand, but what do you think about that, Markus, that we work with? Have you tried it? No, I haven't tried, but it's coming to me in 2 weeks. I don't want to try it. I want to try those. Yeah. What do you mean? I'm trying all the other brands. And Patrick were coming around and saying, you need to try this, Markus. And I was like, you need to try this. And then Armstrong, a guy who known me as a windsurfing, Hernan. Yeah, Hernan. He works in Europe. So he put me on the gears, and it was like plug and play. Yeah. It was so easy to ride. Yeah. And then this wing is, it's black and white, but it's amazing. Yeah. Because I've been riding a lot of them. And then the mid-length board, and they put me, you need to try the 580, the HA. And I was like, no, I never have anything smaller than 800. Yeah, but then you need to have the 680. I was like, okay, I try it. Yeah. I tried. I was like, okay, up on the foil. Okay, I need to have a lot of energy in the wing. Boom. I was just studying. I did a tack. Boom. What the fuck? I went for 5 rounds. I'm like, Patrick, you need to take this. But it was really easy.
Yeah, yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
So it was not like what I thought. It was really hard to ride it and really technical stuff. It was really easy.
Yeah. I think when I first started with Armstrong, we were on the V1 HAs, and they were tricky foils to ride. Really high stall speed, like insanely fast foils. Like even in France at the last race, Gage rode one of the V1 foils and came third. So like for something it's a four-year-old foil that's still competitive, but at the time it was just way too fast for what people wanted. And I think, you know, everyone has a different background that they're bringing in to foiling, and I think only in the last probably 8 to 9 months, a lot of brands have kind of settled on a fairly similar style or feeling of foil. And I think so you're looking at things like the Eagles from F1, Armstrong HAs, Code S Series. They all have same Lift HAs, like very similar feel, where they have really good low stall speeds, so they're easy to get going. They're very forgiving on the pump, but they're in such a small, you know, they've got very lifty sections, but in such a small foil that means they still turn really well. And it's easy to make a foil go really fast, but you need, and we've got plenty of computing that we can model every foil, every section, and really get what you want out of it, but finding the recipe for what works in terms of your speed ranges, your low end, your top end, how it performs in its role at certain speeds, like understanding all the speeds that you're encountering when you're riding has kind of been the key. And that's only been recent that we sort of really started to understand that. I think the HAs were the first foil where, you know, Army was obsessed with going fast. And I was like, yeah, but I was like, speed's good, but as soon as you're riding a wave, quite often you're spending a lot of time trying to get rid of the speed. So like, if you're in a powerful wave and you have so much speed, it's hard to draw a line with that speed. So like a lot of the time, if you watch like Adam Bennett's, say a year ago, he'll spend so much time on the bottom turn. You just ride out into the flat, just going dead straight, and you're just waiting to get rid of the speed, get rid of the speed, get rid of the speed. And once you get to a good speed, then you can bottom turn. And so we just forever were spending our time washing off speed, finding ways, you know, we always want to draw that top to bottom turn, but we just got way too much speed and we're out here. So that's where we've now got foils that they do, like if you're winging and you're just going for straight racing, like they're not going to be the best foil because they're not the fastest. But that speed, it slows you down, but it means you're staying in the pocket and with the pace of the wave. And that's really, like, only in the last 8 to 9 months that I think foils have all kind of found quite a few brands, found a similar speed range. And I think that's really opened up, like, now we've got one foil that you can kind of ride for everything. Like, if I can now bring one foil with me, go winging, downwinding, and proning all with one foil. Whereas before it was, you needed a toe foil, a wing foil, a prone foil, and a downwind foil. And then in each of those, you got like 2 of each. And it was sort of just like, the amount of gear just got ridiculous.
But I would try, there's another foil in the lineup called MA, Mid Aspect, that I thought, Mid Aspect, perfect, what I like, surfing and stuff. And I tried it after I tried the HA, and I was like, it was so different. It was coming up and dropping down. I was like, it was not that easy to ride. So I was like, and now I haven't even ordered it. And it was the first guy who was really honest about it. Yeah. Was yesterday in the car when we talked. I said, the MA, that's not my foil. Yeah. It feels like I needed more speed. And you told me straight ahead, that's the foil that it's want to have more speed and suited to have more speed. And
it was designed for winging originally and riding wave and just like, you've got a power source. Same as either towing or winging, that foil is great for. You've got power. You've either got a ski pulling you or you've got a wing dragging you, and with a lot of wind or big waves. But otherwise, it's insanely high stall. It just drops out. Yeah. It surfs incredible because it's a narrow span, but it's got such a high stall speed. Yeah. And that's where it was designed primarily for winging in big waves. So you've got to always then find, what are the foils designed for? And I think that's where a lot of brands don't necessarily, like especially the conditions you get in Sweden aren't what you get in other parts of the world. Sure. And you've got to understand, and it's tricky as a customer to then kind of realize that and I think that's where brands probably don't do the best job of communicating that. And that's one foil that I think, it's for a very advanced rider in waves, or if you want to just go insanely fast, but
Yeah, we have like over 40 front wings in demo
yeah.
in the back. So that's something, and we learn from Ulf here. Some morning we're trying some new wings, and he didn't know if he was supposed to buy a F1 or Neil Pride or an Armstrong.
Yeah.
I just received that, and we talked. Oh, let's meet up 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we're riding different brands, different foils, just and then connect. What do you think? What do you think? Blah blah blah. So I learned from him a lot.
You're the only one, Markus, who are happy for that.
Huh?
You learn a lot of things.
No, but you do. You learn. You need. In foiling, it's so individual as well. It's so much. You need to really listen, and when people trying, if Spitfire or Armstrong, whatever you try a board, one friend need 100 liters on his mid length, the other guy need 65. Same weight but different style. You know, so many in foil. It's not like surfing and windsurfing.
No,
huge difference.
Yeah.
We are talking a lot. Yeah, you talk. There's a lot of questions you already answered, so I'm really happy with that. Okay, I have one question. Okay, is this the one? Okay, downwind foiling.
Yeah.
You're going to tell us a little bit how you get into it, but we'll wait for that. This is my question. When I'm getting up on foil, my heart rate is so high.
Yeah.
It's on max. So I can't continue pumping.
Yeah.
It's like so much thing happening, and so many times it's on max. Heart rate is max, and then you can't. You don't have any energy to continue with that. Will that get better, or do I need to train as a professional like you do? Or will I finally have the, relaxing coming up and...
Whoa. I'm going to say it's a bit...
I'm an easy learner. Even if I'm a little bit older, but I'm not...
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, training will always help you.
For sure.
But I think the more you practice, like with downwind foiling, the more you do it, the more you realize like which bumps are going to get you up and which aren't. When you're learning, you're paddling for that's the one, oh no, that's the one, and like you're just so tired. Whereas once you get better, you just sit there. Like I'll also just take like every bump that comes past, I'll just take a slow stroke to kind of feel, just to keep my stability. And then once the right one comes, it's 2 to 3 strokes and you're up and riding.
But you feel when the right comes. You don't look back.
Yeah. Don't look back. Never look back. I think I learnt the most from prone paddling in the bumps. I think when you're standing on a sup, you've got so much weight that's shifting the board. You can, you lean forward, all the nose dives. You lean back, the tail sinks. So you've got so much control over the buoyancy. Whereas when you lay on a prone board, it's much more stable, and you just feel how the bumps push you. So if you just go out with your paddle and just lay on the board, not with that board, do it with the downwind board.
Stable? That's his prone board.
But yeah, if you do it with your downwind board, so just lay there and you'll feel which ones will lift you, and then which, like some waves give you like a little push, and then all of a sudden like one out of nowhere will you'll really start to feel the board taking off. You'll feel the foil and you've done nothing. And I think understanding which bumps to go for is the biggest thing, because you can try and paddle up on every bump, but you'll be so tired in the next 15 minutes,
sure.
Whereas...
Right now it's more like you said, I always have the paddle down. If I'm not, I'm falling down. But it's like I have a struggle. Like yesterday, it depends on the conditions. Bay rounds is the best. Because it's like you said, the lines is coming. It's pretty easy. It's easy to get up. You don't have a heartbeat which are super high, and you feel like I have it. Then you're going on a good run, maybe some kind of down run, and it works. Like yesterday, we had a disaster run. Deflate, choppy, backwash, and I went for 5 kilometers, and I went up foil from maybe here to the other side of the shop. But it was, so I was like, what? Again. But tomorrow we have a clinic. Oskar has a clinic. I'm going to be in the clinic. We have a couple of guys who are going to be in that one, and I think we're going to learn a lot. Yeah, we talk about how you train. So yeah, I've seen your legs, pretty big. Yeah. Do we have the answer about how to start downwinding? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, downwinding. I mean, depends on your background. If you are a sup paddler, you know how to paddle straight. You know how to put power down. The next thing is learning the transition from going from paddling to on foil, and I think that's probably the hardest transition. A lot of people tend to just go straight into the bumps and try and paddle up. I think spending time doing flat water starts is really important. There's a lot in just the timing, how you wait on and off the board and how you paddle, and just finding that rhythm and getting the foil up. And realistically, when you catch a bump out in the ocean, you're not just getting a perfect push and you're on foil. You sort of, there's bumps coming everywhere, it's choppy, you're slapping down, you're trying to work the board up, and that's pretty similar to what you have when you're flat water starting. You're touching down, you're trying to work the board up. And as much as it looks like a big mess of stuff, once you've had that first push, you're kind of in between bumps. So it's almost like you're not catching the bump in front and the bump behind's not catching you. So it's almost like doing a flat water start in between the bumps anyway. So I think spending time just practicing putting power down is really key. And there's a lot of guys that, you know, have always, even back home, they really struggle with their getting on foil with downwinding, but you got to be powerful. You've only got 3 or 4 strokes to really put a lot of power down, and the more power you have, the easier it is. And that's where I think, you know, a little bit of training, doing at least 1 flat water session a week makes a massive difference to how much power you can put in and how much you can really pull with a paddle. And it's the same catching waves. You know, it gives you the feeling of going from paddling to on foil, and you can kind of get the repetitions in. And that's where, yeah, I think I said it earlier, like I've always positioned my mast where I'm in the same position as paddling as I am on foil. It's one variable that I don't have to worry about. Once I'm getting on foil, I know I don't have to move forward or move back, I stay in that same position, and I'm just worrying about getting the speed up. So yeah, I think, start in the flat water. Don't be afraid to just practice the flat water starts, and then if you have the chance to do it in the waves, it's another great way. And then after that, it's just you need to have the balance. So just spending time. If you do a 5-kilometer run and you never get on foil, just the muscle memory of just being stable out there, because you'll see it maybe half the time a bump will push you, but you're off balance, so you can't even paddle. So when you're learning it, that's more of the time, but the more comfortable and stable you get out there, if you're only being able to, say you're a bit off balance, you can only put 30% of your power down, you're not going to get on foil. So if you have the stability and the comfort, then you're going to be able to put a lot more power down, which means you're going to get on foil more, which, you just need to spend time out there. Because
we have been foiling in the same, I've been foiling for 4 years and you too.
Yeah.
4 years, so I think I should be a little bit closer.
You're getting there.
Yeah, I'm getting there. And the downwind is pretty, but also winging, we saw you, I didn't know really if you wing, but of course I know you probably wing a little bit. But I don't think I've seen it on Instagram or YouTube.
No.
But you wing pretty good. How much do you do that? And you wing really good.
I've winged twice this year. Okay. So I don't wing a lot. I think we've always got, our wind generally goes up or down the coast, so it's a decision, do you go downwinding or do you go winging? And just with the races, I prioritized downwinding. But I love, winging's the most accessible. You can catch the most amount of waves, you just fly around, you start and finish at the same location. So I think, I love winging. And for me, it's a bit more like I don't have a wind sport background. So like when I first learnt to wing, I took my prone board out with a 4 meter in 5 knots, because if you're a surfer and it's 5 knots, it's ridiculously windy. So I think I went out, maybe it was like 8 knots, I went out and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, this is stupid. Someone was like, you need to go in like 15 to 20 knots. And like, if it was 15 to 20 knots, I wouldn't be at the beach. I was like, it's horrible. So it was kind of all the kiters and windsurfers knew, they had an easier time. It took me like 3 or 4 sessions to kind of learn to get up and start foiling around. But once I was on foil, I was comfortable. But yeah, I mean, same as then learning. I've never learnt to switch foot. I can't do that. I never learnt to tack. I learnt to backflip before I could tack, because we would always have wave. Everyone's like, oh, you got to go learn to tack. And I was like, every time I'm going out, there's just wave, wave, wave. I'm like, where am I going to even try a tack? Whereas you're going out, you can jump off it. So I was like, well, learn backflips then. So I'm actually still just learning. I started getting my tacks yesterday. I felt I was proud of those. And
because Joachim sent me a video in the evening.
Oh yeah.
And he said, this guy I've been winging twice this year and not that much. And then boom, we were flying around. And how was it? Was it fun?
It was good. Yeah. The Anchorman was probably one of the funner bits. Just like ditching the wing, and you can I didn't realize. I mean, they were quite small waves, so it was interesting how much drag the wing gave you when you were trying to ride a small energy. As soon as you got rid of it, you had enough speed and energy to ride the wave. So it was, and then you can kind of practice your pump on the way back out. So
You borrowed my Anchorman. You never tried it before, huh?
No. It's a good product.
It's a really good
product.
Also.
Yeah.
For us to get rid of that balance help we have with the wing.
Yeah.
First time it's like sketchy.
I think Jens did it when we were doing the downwind run. I just saw him maybe 8 Ks in or something, and he's no wing and just pumping downwind. I was like, fuck, has he lost his wing? Or so I kind of cut over to him, and he was like, no, I just had the Anchorman. I was like, oh. So I think it's a great way to just, like you said, the wing kind of gets in the way. You can't see where you're going, and so it's a good way to just ditch it, practice finding the rhythm. And
But I must say that you did the proper way yesterday, Anchormanning. Anchorman, and then you pumped all the way back up.
You did it.
Yeah.
And around it, and then back in.
Yeah.
You can stay there. I'll come later. I have one more question before you are going to give him some question. But it's one thing. The YouTube film, like you said from the beginning, you did a film, you sent it to your friend. The sound of those films are amazing.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
AI.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So there's a plugin for DaVinci Resolve. They've got an audio cleaning plugin that has all these controls in it, and it just cleans it really well from the start, and then you
Did you hear that?
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
AI does it all. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It's all from the GoPro. It's all straight from the GoPro.
It is. Huh?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It works if you shake out the water out of the mics. It helps.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Great.
If I listen to it normally, it sounds like shit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Patrick, you're going to organize that? I'm not. I'm really bad at those things. But what questions do we have? I know this was a question I had. And I don't think I've been answering all of them for you.
Did you write them in Swedish or English?
English.
Oh, good work.
IA. No, I'm kidding.
Question, or maybe a series of questions. I think you talked earlier in the talk. You talked about the swing weight and like how the downwind boards were kind of boring and kind of slow.
Yeah.
I feel like during these 4 years, it's been so much like from the beginning, like we gotta make shorter boards.
Yeah.
And like when the first downwind boards came, they were pretty chunky and bulky and like fine, you could get up quickly, but it's been like a hectic battle between the brands to create the shortest wing board. But how do you think like the sizing of the boards would like how short can a wingboard be, and like what were the like breakthroughs for the downwind boards when they became like, because you said they were slow, but apparently they're good now. Like what happened?
So I mean, my downwind board is, it's not a production board just because no one would ever want to buy it, I don't think. So my if I'm downwinding at home, I don't know what this is. This is
I have it here.
Is this a 75? Yes.
Yeah.
That's my downwind board at home. So that's what if I go for a session 9 out of 10 days, that's what I ride.
What do you mean you paddle up that with a paddle?
Yeah, so the mid-length 75 litre is my SUP downwind board. So that's the only board I use for racing, because like when we went out the other day, I need to be able to paddle up on every single bump, because ultimately you're about to spend 2 hours on foil on a board that can paddle up on absolutely anything. Whereas with this, it probably takes me a minute to a minute and a half to get on foil, but it's 6-1 versus 7-6. So the feeling...
like the bottom shape, because you've seen so many various like.
Yeah. So this was one of the biggest things from the last 2 races. So probably easier. Through the tail here, a lot of the boards. So if you're going dead straight in a line, having like the sharp edges here, if you sort of touch down on a rail, they'll want to track in that straight direction. So if you're trying to change direction and your board touches down, it'll just shoot out in that direction, but you're trying to get that way. So your momentum, you're going the wrong way to which the board wants to go. So one of the biggest things that we had to work on was making sure that the tail, when you're doing a turn, won't track in one direction and it will release. So we put a heap of V through the tail here, and kind of that's why these, I guess, chines come down to such an aggressive pin, is that when it does touch down, it releases straight away. So a lot of the other boards you'll see, like, they're dead flat through the tail, and they've got like quite sharp and wide chines. So when they touch down, they'll just shoot in that direction. So you're never really going dead straight downwind. Like if a bump comes, you kind of might have to zigzag to stay with it to keep your speed a little bit lower. And that's where we kind of worked really hard with these latest iterations to have something that releases off the water. The other side of it is when boards have gotten so long, like you see with the old Kalamas, the boxes were way back here and everyone was complaining that they were too far back for their foils, and that was partially because GoFoil, the way their foils are set up, they ride a lot further back. But once we went to such long boards and we realized that the swing weight was right up here, when you're trying to paddle up on foil, the tail's just touching down, you've sort of got that flip side that it's touching down in the water at the back. So you kind of needed something that could release off the water and get that quick release. And that kind of similarly kind of led to I guess, a lot more rocker through the back, trying to keep that board from digging down into the water. So that's kind of where we started kind of getting that rocker that runs a little bit, a lot more rocker out the back and keeping that V like all the way out. So that's kind of the tail. I think the development mostly has come, or the improvements in the last year have really come in the tail design. There's still, if you look at probably the 2 sides of things, you've kind of got the KT boards. It's a hull, so it's a fully rounded bottom, similar with Amos boards. Then you've got stuff like the duotone boards that are almost dead flat, or the Kalamas, and then have quite a sharp rail. The 2 sides is the KTs with that hull are incredibly unstable, so they want to roll over. They're not easy to stand on. But when you're working them up on foil, you've only got, say, that center bit that's touching down, so you have much less resistance on your touchdowns, but you got less stability. So it's pros and cons. And then the boards we did, we kind of went a little bit in between. So up the top, you've got quite rounded, soft rails, so it does reduce the touchdowns area, but it doesn't make it too unstable. So it's sort of in between the two. I think it's a little bit of a hybrid in the bottom shape. And then the more extremes, you get the Amos boards, say, that have a really deep V in the nose. So similarly, it cuts through the water when you're getting that first push off the bump. But then also the same thing as like with the tail, if it touches down when you're riding, it'll shoot out in that one direction. It won't allow you to track. So that's why we've got quite soft rails up the top here. So even if you're on rail and you touch down, it's not directional. It won't shoot out in one direction. It'll allow you to kind of lift off and keep going in that way. So.
Yep. Actually, Markus, you and I discussed the slanted rails, like, and how that maybe adds some stability, like, while in the water. It's exactly
yeah.
And also, but you talked about, I mean, there's not many people in the world who's downwinding with the 75 liter board, that's for sure.
No.
What I feel, but I have a 7.7, I had a really hard time to get up on foil.
Yeah.
But as long as, when I get the 8.4, I was so much easier to get up and narrow. And now when I get those, one of the things why I really looked at Armstrong was because I understand a longboard will put me on foil. I don't care if I surf like you did yesterday, like fully surfed for surfing downwind. Yeah. I was like, I want up and then I can be relaxed. And I think the longboards, even I tried the 9.6, it's 70 wide. Yeah. And the 811 I have, it's also 17 wide and 108 liters, 118 liters. But the long makes it stable and it's glide like a canoe. It's coming up on foil so much easier. Yeah.
totally.
And I don't really care how much I can still turn
Yeah.
It's not like you, for sure, but the Salters technique, I think you will turn the 811 for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm coming up on foil. If you have a board which are short, you're not coming up on foil. Definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, that's
easy.
If you're not getting on foil, you're paddling, and that's not a whole lot of fun. So if you don't struggle getting up on foil, then sure, you can ride smaller, but I think in general, longer is easier.
How big is this?
This is 7.6 by 15 and a quarter.
And
86 litres, I think.
Okay. How much are you?
74 at the moment.
Okay.
Which is heavier than I normally am. I know I probably naturally sit around 68, 69. Kind of put on a bit of muscle, just curious to see how it would change downwinding. It just became more effort, more work. So I'm going to lose it again, I think, once I get home. But and as well, I'd say my 75 litres, not that fun when I'm this heavy.
So it's a 7.6, okay.
Yeah.
I will not stand on this one, that's for sure. Maybe in the bay run.
You can try it tomorrow?
Yeah, I can try it tomorrow. And you shim a little bit because you try to prototype whatever you talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Something you can tell us?
Foil-wise?
You said don't...
Tails.
Tails, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad there's just 3 tails to choose between. It's really nice.
It's simple.
Yeah.
It's easy.
When
you say you 3, what do you choose? A 140, 180?
And something big, I don't know, is it
220? Yeah.
Because the Surf 2.5 is a little bit older, huh? I don't
A little bit slower, a little bit more drag,
but
then a little bit easier bottom end.
Okay.
So I think I like to keep things as simple as possible. I just ride the 140. I like simplicity.
The smallest one, yeah.
Yeah, the smallest one, yeah.
Because you can ride it.
Yeah.
For us, I mean...
Most guys ride the 180. The 180 is the most popular.
I start to play drums again, and I have friends which are really good drummers, and they have 2 kits, and I'm so much worse, and I have so many more gears. I have like 20 snares, I have 10 kits of drums, because it's the same here. I can't downwind. I can buy whatever. It doesn't matter. I want to have 2 boards of those.
Yeah.
I want to have the biggest foil. I want to have the bigger tail.
Yeah.
I want to have a 72 mast. Because they said it's going to easier on the foil. You buy whatever to get the success.
Yeah.
But for you, like yesterday, he said like, oh, I forgot my bag with all my tail wings. Okay, I'll bring you one. And then down on the beach, I said, fuck, I forgot. Oh, you did? I don't have anything. Okay, sorry. What do you have in your car? No, I have this and this. Oh, I'll take that.
It'll work, yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
But for me, it would not work.
Yeah.
Because if there is a little straw, I take it.
Yeah.
Even if it costs 200 euros, 2,000 euros.
What's the biggest foil you use?
680.
In downwind?
Or 685 in downwind. So I get an extra 5 out of it. But yeah, that's the biggest I ride.
Which is the smallest one?
My prone, I've got toe foils that are 470, and then my usual prone foils are 480.
But when you're downwind, you normally go with a
685, yeah.
He borrowed an 880 yesterday.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, because when you're downwind, like you're out on open swell.
Yeah.
It goes so much faster than normally. So when we've downwind, we've picked like our smaller foil, like my smallest one is 1,000.
Yeah.
And I just feel I need more speed.
Yeah.
But I felt very reluctant to go on anything smaller.
Yeah.
I still think like 1,000 is so quick, but still the open swell is...
They move really fast.
But that's...
How does that compare? Like you've been out here a day or 2 ago.
Yeah, I said it to you. I was like, oh, ride a big foil. There should just be wind bumps. But the big swells, like I was on the 880, which is a very big foil for me. And I think my fastest kilometer was around a 240, which on that foil was really fast.
Yeah.
So I think if ideally I would have ridden a 680, and there was a lot of energy that I couldn't keep up with.
Yeah.
So the flip,
sorry.
No, you're right.
No, I was just thinking, how do you compare that if you were 20 kilos up like me?
Yeah.
Is that still 680 because of the speed, or would you want to switch it up to the 8?
You probably the 880 I think would be a good. Yeah. Most guys that are around 90 kilos are riding the 880 back at home.
Okay. Yeah.
They're kind of learning more on the 1080 or the 1180.
Yeah.
And then as they progress down, they're going to the the 880. But it's the same thing. I think we all, once you can get up on foil, everyone's so obsessed with the big bumps that move under you. Everyone just goes, I want to ride those. Everyone's obsessed with getting the longest board and the smallest foil. But I mean, realistically, there's also all the wind energy. And I think it just depends on what you want to ride. Like, if you're going to ride the swells, the run's going to be over in 30 minutes. Whereas if you want to go, all right, well, I want to go a bit slower. I want to, ride a bit on the big bumps, do some turns, then pull off with the wind bumps. Every time you pull off, you gain, at home it's usually like 9 to 12 seconds period. So every time you pull off, you gain 12 seconds in your run. So if you pull off, if you just keep hunting waves, you're going to waste 30 minutes of that run just because you wanted to go fast with that one bump. Whereas if you peel off and turn, every time you pull off to the one behind, you gain 12 seconds that you can ride the whole way down. So for me, you get more time on foil.
Yeah, I have one thing there. When you learn to downwind, the first thing to learn, it's not even to think about small foils or whatever. You can take the biggest foil, and you should take the biggest foil, is to learn how to connect backwards. If you're just coming up and go forward, that's not downwinding. First, you learn to be out of energy and find it in the back. It's not what you think. Before I went to the camp with John Mann, I thought, okay, I'm going over, I'm going down. But he said, no. Connect backwards. You can take the biggest foil you have, Markus. It's like a 1300 PNG. Perfect. Take it every day. Just connect. When you feel it's running over you, it disappears in front, you can't run over it, you just connect. You need to learn to connect backwards. Then you can stay on foil forever. So you can really ride the 1800 you have. It's the best foil to start with, even if it's howling 30 knots.
But when you try to connect, is it by pumping with your legs? Or
no, you're on a wave like that, and it's running. You can't pump into it because it's so fast. Yeah. If you're out on the ocean, it's twice as fast than the bay run. Yeah. And then you're going off, and you look here and you see the swell, and maybe it's too far back, but you see this little wind shop. Use that energy, and then more speed, and then you turn, and you turn.
You leg pump.
Huh?
You leg pump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I pump a little bit. It's not like that.
You don't use the paddle.
Huh?
You don't use the paddle.
No. If it's super tiny, I do maybe 2 pumps and a paddle when I'm really out of energy. If it's like, 10 knots and small. But then also when you turn kind of in the bottom and sucks up to the wave, and then you push it down. That's my experience now. So the size of the foil, if you can't get up when you want to get up, don't take a smaller foil. So always, if you still have the 1400, 1800, it's like JB, is it in Australia?
JB, yeah.
He's a really good example to not just going for the small stuff. He said like the Nash 1800 Jens, he's really award that one. Jet HA. So that's what I think, that don't rush to have smaller foils to run with as well, because you're not going to run with as well. You are a special example because you're one of the best in the world. But for us, average student, less than that, take something big, learn to connect backwards, because then you can have so much fun.
Yeah. And I think it's easy. You get out there and you see this big lump, and all you want to do is get down it. And I think the biggest thing for me was learning to pull off as early as possible. Like if you're on a bump and it's really steep, everyone sort of goes, I'm going to get a rest. Like ride with the bump as long as possible. But that, as it's steep and you're riding into it, it's just disappearing. Like it's starting to shift off. So as soon as it's steep, just get as much speed as you can and just pull off. And everyone kind of, it's kind of counterintuitive. You'd rather stay with it because it's steep, it's got the energy, but you stay with it and it just dissipates. And then all of a sudden you've got this energy and you're just going towards the back of the one in front. And then you're stuck out in a trough, and then you've got to pump and try and find energy. Whereas if you get that energy, you just immediately pull left, like, right, whichever way you need to go, pull that way, use the energy to just glide to the one behind and sit behind that. And generally, they're in sets of 3 or 4 in that train. Then usually to the side, say 15 to 20 meters either side, will be another train, and they'll be slightly offset. So you pull off, say if you're getting towards the front of that train, if you pull off, you know that you'll either get to sort of the second or the third in the train either side. And it's a lot of time. Like a lot of it is reading the back of waves. Like generally you'll see a wave, you know, start to form and you're obsessed with like, oh, I got to try and pump over and get into that. But by the time you get over and into it, it's started to move already. And so you don't get the energy. So it's having the confidence to pull off, use your speed and sit behind that one. And there won't be anything at the time, but ultimately that wave will move and the second one will start to grow behind it. And you'll just sit in behind and it'll just start to grow. You don't need to pump. And it's just finding that, like learning that rhythm, learning to trust that that one behind will form. And so a lot of it's just reading the back of the waves and not trying to go over into it, is just to sit behind it and sit behind those peaks, and that'll then form with you. So, yeah. And that's the same thing, like if you want to, yes, you can ride small foils and chase bumps, but then, and I think that's just, the sport's gone that way because the best riders have gone to, everyone's posting their Strava times and you go, oh, I did my fastest kilometre, and everyone's trying to go fast, but...
What's fast?
Like 140s per kilometre, so sort of like 34, 35 k's an hour average is kind of your top end.
That's fast.
Yeah. And you like that sort of speed, you're scared the whole, you're just holding on and trying to freaking, it's not fun. But yeah, like you just start playing different games, like then try and like, even though you're on a big foil, you're getting up every time, but then try and, all right, how do I pump? Like, I don't want to pump, so I want to try and ride for 1 minute without pumping. So then you try and like link waves without pumping. Like try more of that sort of stuff with the bigger foils. It teaches you a lot more about the rhythm and the energy. You don't need to just constantly go to smaller and smaller and smaller foils.
But I haven't really seen any, because I've mostly downwinded with wing, and I haven't really seen any downside of having smaller foil. Since I always had the wing. So, yeah. But I imagine with a paddle for sure, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the thing you said there with you're actually riding, because that's one thing now that you said it, where it sort of clicked in my head a little bit. Because you ride the backside. Yeah. That's where you have the most power. So, so you always look at this like backside of the wave, and that's where you should be. Yeah. And now when you said it, it was like, oh yeah, that's right, because that's when you get the best sort of push.
Yeah, exactly.
When you see like the big backside, but then if you look behind you, there's nothing.
Yeah.
But still, your foil is just pushing you, like So that's
exactly. And that's
I think that's a mindset thing.
Yeah. I think we're
it feels weird.
Naturally, you're going to the biggest, steepest wave, so to go behind it just like doesn't make any sense. And every time, I did it when I was learning, every time I'd try and pump over and into that spot. By the time I got to it, it was gone. And you're like, oh, now I'm just pumping in the middle of nowhere and still waiting for a wave. So
I think I've also, which I think is not, makes any sense maybe, but I've also thought of having like a longer mast. Because I think I've maybe done what you're saying, like trying to get the biggest one, and then you just go straight full speed, and then you just crash. But how long is your mast usually when you're downwinding?
I usually ride the 86 centimeters. So it's on the scheme is long. Most guys are probably, as an all-rounder, ending up around 80, and that's for probably more because we're prone. More the prone guys tend to go a little bit short. Like wing guys, they're going so fast. A little bit of length helps, and you've got power, so you're not worried about the drag of such a long mast. I tend to just ride 86 for everything, prone, downwind, and winging, and I just find once you're confident with one length, it's so much easier. You know where it is, you trust it. Whereas if you're constantly changing, you don't know if you're too high, too low. It's sort of a bit tricky. So, but I think I would recommend 80 as for general, just all rounders.
You have 80 now.
Yeah, I used that for the other day. Yeah, but I still normally ride an 86. Yeah. But I had no idea what.
It's actually harder to get up. I feel the difference if I have 85 or 25, 75. I can feel the difference to get up for.
Yeah.
Because it's less drag on a 75 mast.
Definitely.
And it's not. Yeah. When I don't have that problem anymore, I will not use the 75. But
there's two sides, which is I did a bunch of testing with mast lengths. So when you go to bigger foils, the shorter masts are way easier. Like just less drag. Once you're trying to start on really small foils and you're trying to work, like you're not getting the push, the longer mast as you work the board has more of a longer arc. Yeah. So you'll get more lift out of the longer mast as you're working it on the paddle up. So that we found like 85 was easier to flat water start with say a 580 than it is on a shorter mast, and that's just because the swings, the radius.
But that's smaller foils.
Yeah, that's small. Yeah. So with the big foils, it's way harder. So it's an interesting.
Okay, I didn't know that one.
You don't need to. Yeah, you don't need to know that one.
No, maybe one day. You never know. Any more questions, Matthias? Or
I got one.
Yeah.
For the pumping. I know that all of you down race guys are pumping for, as you said, 2 hours or something like that. I can't work out how that's possible because I'm out of breath after a minute and a half, 2 minutes of like duck start flat water pumping with a huge weighing in the minimum board, which should be the easiest. Is there any like good way to relax while pumping, or is it just you learn and then you sort of get into the rhythm and then everything gets easier?
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine it's just fitness, because I've seen like some of the guys are insanely fit, but some of the guys are not.
And still doing a lot.
They're not like World Cup triathlon fitness guys.
Like you.
No, that's all my sister. There's a few parts to that. I think, being relaxed is a tricky one. That's time on foil. That's a tricky one to. You don't want to be tense. With pumping in general, there's a mindset, and I think if you've got footage, watching yourself back is key, but everyone has this notion of to get projection forward is you need to drive the foil down. So you'll see with a lot of foilers, their feet stay flat on the board. They just drive the foil down. Their chest and upper body stays at the same height, and they're just driving down with the foil, trying to get projection forward. Whereas you see the good pumpers, they look more relaxed, but they're standing upright, and you'll see their back leg almost, or their back foot goes right up onto their toes. They're almost off the board. And that's because your mindset should be not trying to push the foil down, but trying to jump up as high as possible. So I think biggest things are to have quite a narrow stance. So like if you're about to do like a box jump at the gym, like that's your stance. Like you should be shoulder width apart. You want to be jumping back up as high as possible, because if you're just driving down and your chest is sort of staying at the same level, you're forever getting lower on the mast. And you see those guys, they sort of pump, they start touching down and they just slowly sort of stop. Whereas if you're trying to jump up as high as possible, the foil is much more efficient up high, and you're ending your pump back up high. So you kind of just forever just keep popping back up. So I think it's a small thing that really helps, is just don't worry about pushing down, because if you're trying to jump up, you're doing the same thing. You're putting force down, but it's quite a different. It changes the biomechanics of your upper body, and that's where you see guys that are putting down so much power, but they're going fast, but they just burn out eventually. So that's the main thing that I see with most people. But yeah, the time on foil does help you stay relaxed, and does help.
Into it, like you said, the speed, because it's all like duck starting, but also when you're like out winging, the struggle sometimes I feel like is losing the speed. That I need to like keep the speed up, and you need better like technique to keep the speed high.
Speeds. There's always, and it depends on the different riders' weights, their size foils. There is an optimum speed in terms of how much energy you're putting out versus how long you can go for. You can get to too high of a speed, but it's not sustainable for a long time. But then you can go too slow, and you're having to do really big, deep pumps that also burn you out. So there's sort of a happy medium, and every foil, it takes time to learn where that is with every foil.
Because when I tried the new Axis Art V2, the 879, I was like, wow, this shit pumps, because I was able to keep the high speed, and it helped. And that's where, it takes time to find that with every foil, to find how much energy you need to put in, and how high you need to jump. And it is, everyone has different techniques. It's always tricky to give one advice that'll work for everyone. So it's, if you have video, send it to me. I'm happy to give some tips away.
I do have some video. But
We can put it up here. We can critique it.
Pro surfing. Do you think it's feasible here? Has anyone done it?
We're doing. I'm doing it. Me, Jens, for sure. Frederick, no, not. I love it. Yeah? So much fun. It's pretty easy.
How much? I mean,
it depends on the conditions. Sorry. Conditions.
How big waves do you need?
First, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But it's really good if it's a little bit slow wave and get some foam in the back and then reform. That's perfect. But I did the first time I did it. I had a Fanatic. That's 3 years ago. 511. Yeah. Big foil, slow one, probably 1500 and something like that. But I missed maybe 2 takes off of 10. And I'm going straight like that because I was not a good foiler. But it's pretty, take it easy, feel your hand, feel the pressure. You can, when you have your hand here, you can really feel the pressure and then just go up. But it's really suited to the condition. Then I tried in Österlen, powerful waves, and I was just flying, you know, take off. It was like a catapult. But, and then those mid-length boards are amazing. Even, I think, 85 liters, because it's narrow, it's easy, and it's really efficient in the glide. But now, I have a Nash board. It's a 7.0 mid-length. I call it a mid-length prone board, 60 liters. It's super easy. Then I can paddle up before I get some foam. But the mid-length board is really good. I haven't done it that much this year, but more winging, but in those conditions, and also paddling. But I probably, I love it. It's so much fun. And Jens, he's the best guy here, I would say. And we have a couple of guys.
But to be realistic, prone foiling is not easy. Henrik and I went out with that mid-length board, and we had about 2 hours of trying, and between the two of us, we had 0 waves.
Yeah.
But do you surf? No,
we're not.
No, but that's, I mean, you need to have a surfy takeoff. If you don't surf, of course, it's really hard.
And you don't surf?
I do not surf. I'm terrible at surfing, but I'm not a terrible foiler.
No, definitely.
You can foil, but not.
But it was so incredibly different.
Yeah.
Takeoff was.
But you surf. And you have good waves at home. You have perfect. In the bay, you take the shoulder and then go into the bay. It's going to be amazing.
Even around here, I think A-Bay and
Layet.
But the winds kind of cross, so it's the pump back out's not bad, and I think you can walk to one end of the beach and sort of paddle in.
You're on like pretty good conditions for that. Like normal conditions is
it's onshore.
Straight onshore. Yeah.
No, but the waves get so much more space between them in onshore conditions, and also it's hard to pump out for sure. But you can connect on side. Yeah. If it's a little bit south or north, you can connect with the wind. Yeah,
you just go with it.
And
zigzag.
Then end up corner of the bay and paddle out again.
Yeah.
For sure.
I was more imagining paddling back.
Paddling back. No, for sure. But it's definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think the setup here, like A-Bay with the gradual sand, like the bottom just slow, like they're quite soft, gentle waves. It's kind of perfect for learning. Ours are much steeper, like they really push you in, which is it's not as easy. So I think it.
We have the best condition now.
Yeah.
It's world class.
Yeah.
It is actually.
It's good here.
Varberg is good.
No, but I mean Sweden.
West Coast.
West Coast.
But having just a little bit of length in the board, because whether you subsurf or you prone surf, just having a little bit extra length, that gives that window of popping up onto the foil just grows so much. I think when subsurfing, it's like, because I started off on a 7.0 and then I went down to a 5.0 and then now I'm back to like a 7.1 or something, more downwind kind of shape. And I think that downwind kind of shape works really well for our conditions here in Varberg. Yeah. I actually wanted a board that shape like 5-6 years ago, but there was not around. So I was like, shit, why doesn't anyone like board out like this? Because that would be perfect here, because we have these bumps coming and they're like really slow, but a really nice shape to them. But they're, it's really, but you couldn't catch them. You needed that little push. And the same.
Over, I don't know the width which I'm over, which I lose that. For me now, maybe it's around 22, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But when I'm on 19, 20, I can just feel, it's like surfing. When I get over a little bit wider board, I'm not surfing anymore. It's like, I need to have Stångs effect, I need to häva den hela tiden liksom. I need to, what do you say that in English?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, oh, it depends on also, I mean, everything under 25 is working, but when I get 19, 20, it's like, I can surf turns so much more.
Yeah, yeah. I think it depends a lot on your style, like how everyone's style, how they initiate their turn is different.
For sure.
I think, you know, you obviously tend to roll into it. I roll, but I have a lot of yaw when I come out of a turn. So I particularly like shorter boards because shorter board gives you a much more responsive yaw movement. Narrow board gives you a much more responsive roll. So you sort of see, like, you know, you're obviously enjoying or noticing the roll more than the yaw. So it's that your style suits that kind of more flowy roll, like rail to rail. So, you know, and then you're liking shorter boards, so maybe you've got a little bit more yaw.
I don't have any style at all, but I can feel that the short one helps a lot for this.
Yeah, yeah.
But for me, when I get on a short 5.0, 17, 19 wide, 45, then it gets too skatey. I lose the control.
Yeah, yeah.
So the length for me, like a mid-length gets stability, so I can lean on, put my front pressure like I do on the windsurfing board or a surfboard. I tend to go more and more volume in my surfboard, and I surf much better because I don't need to be that super precise, and I don't surf 200 days in a year. So I can really lean into the turns and use a little bit more on the front. And I like the front foot pressure when I also foil. So for sure, it's different.
Yeah, everyone's different, and that's why you got demo boards.
Yeah.
Thanks, Oskar.
It's all right.
Keeping with talking about trends, with the new sort of generation of foils.
That's why I have this one here.
A lot of the new
development
seems to be really focused on the reflex and the super aggressive camber.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that something that...
Do you know, guys, what that is? 50% doesn't know that. Okay, can you explain it?
Yeah.
Because this is what, I guess, I don't know the whole history of Armstrong, but what we're talking about, Armstrong, Katie Foil, a lot of brands.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so, I mean, these two foil sections are very different. So you see the bottom shape of this one has a massive scoop out here. So that's your camber.
Is that the camber or the reflex?
That's camber.
Okay.
So then this one doesn't have any reflex. So that foil on the top side, there's a little bit of a scoop out there.
Yeah.
So that's your reflex in the trailing edge. There is the common misconception that camber means more lift, which it came mostly from lift foils. Their whole marketing campaign was camber gives you lift. And they sort of changed they kind of run the same profile in all their foils, and they've just slightly changed the camber. Whereas you look at something like this foil, which has an even more aggressive camber, but doesn't produce more lift. So there's a lot. Foil design, or section design anyway, is a dark art at best. We use the Ineos engineers from the America's Cup. We get them for 3 months of the year that help us with all of our section development. So this section is from them. This is one of the sections that they developed. A lot of the heritage of this section came out of the Moth racing boats. So one of the things with these foils is, in a boat, as you're gaining more lift with a foil, like often if you're dropping into a really fast wave or you're winging, you're going faster, you tend to start to transition and you lean into the foil, you put more weight forward because it's gaining more and more lift. If you have a boat with the same feeling, you can't shift the center of mass forward. The boat just goes like this and tips over. And that's where these sections, the faster you go, they don't gain any more lift. So that your center of mass stays exactly the same. So this is a downwind race, or we call them the downwind performance foil, but it's a race-orientated foil. The faster you go with this, you don't change your weight. You just stay in the exact same position, feet don't change. And that's where I guess this trend of foils has come from. Is it the most? I don't think it's the most user-friendly section. Yes, its speed range is incredibly wide. It can handle absolutely any speed at the top end, but still has good bottom end. But it's a little bit counterintuitive because every other foil made, it gains lift with speed. So you start to lean into the foil and you anticipate there's going to be more and more lift, whereas this doesn't. So for a lot of people, they get on and they really struggle because they're like, it's nose diving is what most people say, because they think it's going to lift and they start putting their weight forward and they just nose dive. So it's definitely a trickier, takes a little bit of time to get used to. But it's, yeah, and it's the same. I think Duotone, North, both have got almost identical foil sections now in their latest downwind foils. All the KT foils have that now that are about to come out. And it kind of, it does go against that sort of camber is the biggest factor. The camber line, if you want to look at the sections, although it has an aggressive bottom shape, it has a very flat top. So the overall camber line's fairly straight. And so yeah, it's a tricky one. I wouldn't look into it too much. Like everyone, whether you've got a little bit of reflex, but it has so much to do with, when we look at foil sections, you're looking at your wash in, wash out angles, how they twist, at what point are they twisting, then your percentage thickness overall. You are generally putting different sections in throughout the foil, so you're moving your center, your thickest point will often move throughout. It'll change how much lift you're getting at different areas in the foil. You're then starting to look at, underneath that top layer, you have different orientated fibers. So you're then starting to look at how the foil flexes under load. So the faster you go, the tips are thinner, so the trailing edge will flex and deform more than your leading edge. So you're starting to look at how the tips of the trailing edge are moving under certain, it gets insanely complex like that, and that's where everyone, don't.
I must say, the first time I tried this, me and Janne wing, this was the one we wing in light wind, and it was actually surprisingly easy to ride.
Yeah, it's got a really good low end.
Compared to some other brands,
high
aspect, downwind, super fast foils. Yeah, this one was not. I trust this one. As I was up on foil doing, maneuvers and stuff, I really like.
Yeah, it's got insane glide. Yeah,
it was not tracking. It was pretty nice.
Still rolls well. Yeah.
Well, you're sort of halfway into a very fun and interesting discussion about all the technicalities of the foil design. How far can you take it with the simulation before you start to rely on good feedback?
Yeah, and I think that's because all the modelling in CFD comes from the boat world. The trickiest, they have much more set parameters. They know they've got force coming from a sail. You can set where those are. They're generally just tracking a line. So for winging, you can get really close with what you feel with foiling. But as soon as you start turning, everything gets incredibly complex. And that's where, the America's Cup guys enjoy working with us because it's a whole nother set of parameters that they're trying to understand as well. We're all trying to learn together. And I think that's where, if you want to just go straight and fast, I think our parameters are pretty damn close. Especially if you're just toe foiling straight line speed, it's almost exactly what you simulate. But as soon as you add a wave and how you're turning, and it's such a unique moment because you have your roll and pitch, and then you factor that in with a power source and a flexing wing, and no one's even close to simulating all of that together. It's generally you're looking for what are your speed ranges that you need, and sort of how much roll do you want to get out of it, and then you're trying to test all your twists and your layups more by feel. So there's a lot that you can simulate, but then it quickly becomes feel. And I think that's kind of where Armstrong have always gone more down the wave riding realm, and they've focused more on the flow and the feel of the foils. And I think especially with the HAs, we were trying to balance all those, the roll, the yaw, and the pitch. They get on some foils and they're really stable, they don't roll, then the pitch is up and like this. And so we kind of really wanted to get all three of those kind of working together so it feels like a very fluid, smooth kind of feeling, and I think, you know, still to this date, it's one of my favorite, just because it's a very smooth foil to ride. I think
it is like, it looks like really dangerous, hard to ride, huh? For sure, but it's really easy. I guess something to do with the profile and stuff, and actually it's not, actually to look at this, it's pretty slow.
Yeah.
It's not super fast, so the last couple of times I shimmed the rear wing, which I've never done before on, like, I was riding Axis. But when I shim it, I get more glide. And I still have control and pitch control. And if I would just go in the waves, I will not shim it, probably, in the waves here. But it's really easy to ride. Even the 618, kind of medium wind for me. And I will never go bigger than 880 in super light 10 knots of wind.
Yeah.
But then I took the 1180 winging one day, and it feels like when me and Ulf were out winging, I had the 1180 for the first time, and I could still turn it. And then I have that for downwinding, and then I jump down to the 880 or 780 or 680. Yeah.
It's quite interesting how the foil, like, you guys ride, influence the way you're riding, and somehow it kind of unlocks or limits riding. I can see, like, especially Janne is super fun to watch when he rides, because you can see him ride and he's like, he's good, but then he drops his wing with the anchorman, and they're like, so that's how good he actually is. Because he's a surfer, and when he loses the wing, he just unlocks the potential. And I can see when you're riding the Armstrong gear, it seems to be a different kind of Markus riding, because it's more fluent. It's not as aggressive, but it's the bottom turn and the transition and the top turn sort of all becomes one motion instead of three separate motions. Which is super interesting, because I can see when you're riding the Axis gear or when you ride the Armstrong gear, you can tell from 100 meters away what setup you're on, because the style is different. And for me, I'm not in tune with the Armstrong gear yet, even though I'm wearing the shirt right now. So for me, I can only go and I've changed the series of foils, but when I ride, I can feel like, okay, now I'm in sync with the motion, or I'm out of sync. But it's a super interesting thing to see, and just how much it changed the riding style. And Markus describes that it's easy to ride, so I just do it.
But it's so amazing how, like, just in 1 year or 2 years or even 4 years, like, what the fuck? What's going to happen in 2 years or 3 years? Like, when I tried the Armstrong foil for the first time, I was like, no shit, don't you have a bigger one?
It was the 680 you tried, huh?
Yeah, I think it was. But then, like, as you said, like, it's...
No, 780. And after that you said, I should have trust you and take the 680.
But, like, it's rather slow to be, like, that small, and it rides really easy.
I think that's where pretty much everyone I know that's got them from back home, I said the same thing. I was like, they're like, I think I get the 880. I'm like, no, you get a 680. And they're like, it's too small. And they all bought the 880. And then they're like, okay, wait. And then they went to the 780 and they sold that. And then, like, all of them have ended up with the 680. And it's just surprising. And that's where it's so hard to tell with just looking at a section, like, it's going to do this or that. And and that's where, like, I think where the sport's going in however many years. I mean, these HAs were the first foil that I got on, and I didn't want to change it. And I think the last 6 months has actually, I've somewhat lost interest in the development in the sense that the biggest limiting factor is more me and my riding. So it's kind of the first time that I've been, all right, I'm just going to ride one foil and I want to work on my riding rather than constantly going, it's a bit too pitch stay or a bit whatever. It's the first foil that I was like, all right, it's not me anymore. It's, not the foil anymore. Like, I've got a foil that does exactly what I want it to do. Now it's me needing to learn, different things to progress. So, and I think, there's a few brands that have all ended up in a similar realm, and I think there is a limit, I'm sure, to the development. It won't be as rapid as it has been, but I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. But in general, I think, like you said, I think riding one foil, like, you get on one foil, you're a bit uncomfortable, you change, you get a bit more kind of like just ride one, like I did that. I rode one foil, one setup for 3 months straight, and it was the best thing I did for my riding. Because rather than constantly trying to change things and change the gear to suit what I'm feeling, I just learnt to trust the gear with like 100. I knew exactly what it was going to do, and then I could just work on my own riding. So I think everyone's obsessed with change, like you said, different board, different this. Like, you just ride one thing, you'll know it inside out. You'll never have any hesitation.
But you're actually there now also.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, a year back, you had the feeling that something was not perfect on the gear.
Yeah.
But there is a couple of foils coming out, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Like this one here, I would say for us, Spitfire on an axis is, perfect speed and so much more rolling when you're winging and rounding.
But also like how the breaching has improved. Like that was.
This one never breach.
Yeah, you don't feel it.
It doesn't matter that the wing is under the back wing. Is there a change between the angle between Armstrong foils connection with or another brand?
Yeah. Every brand
because
will
you
have
never, if you breach the back, your history.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
But on Armstrong, I breached maybe 2 times.
In the back?
No, falling.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's never happened.
Yeah.
You feel it. Is that because this one is under here? No.
It stays under. Yeah. I mean, so
or is the angle is just. Do you know? I don't know.
You should look that way.
Fuck, I don't know.
What size is that? It looks more suitable for me. I think.
This is 1180.
This is the one I was using yesterday.
Yeah.
This is a setup. 79 mast. I feel that's.
I mean, if you're coming from Axis, mount their views on the other side. So I struggled.
Most of them.
I struggled heaps with just the tail just kept coming out.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I guess they've always done. I haven't really thought about that, but yeah. Every brand, like generally, most brands, like every foil has a different angle of attack. So like these are sort of at, I think, 1.25 to 1.5 degrees. That race foil sits at negative 2.8 degrees, which makes no sense at all. So that's where there's a lot in that feeling. I think the America's Cup guys were pushing for negative 3 degrees, and I kind of tested that and it was horrendous. And so we kind of tuned that. Like ultimately you want to, if you're riding an Armstrong foil and an Armstrong board, if you say you test with an 85 kilo rider that's gliding at kind of where the optimum speed range for this foil is, you want the deck angle where you're standing to be level. And that's kind of where we'll set the rockers in the board, the angles of the board boxes, and the front foil angles. And that just means that regardless of what foil you grab out of our range, if you're at that optimal speed range or where the foil's designed to operate, the deck of the board will be level. And that's where you get that kind of even front foot, back foot. You're not standing up here and, your feet should be level, and it makes the pump and the sort of swing weight feels a little bit more natural. So that's kind of how we set our angles, but everyone does it. And it is tricky going between brands. I think, especially with downwind foiling, it's very important to shim your mast, the base plate shims. And that's partly because when you're paddling, the angle of the foil has a massive influence on how much lift you're getting. So if your board's very nose down, the angle of the foil is actually way too high. So as you're paddling, the surface area or the angle of attack of the foil is creating lift rather than the foil section itself. So you'll see guys, they kind of lift up, stall, lift up, stall. And that's because the angle of attack's giving too much lift and it's going too early that the foil section's not engaging. So if you then start to put shim in the front of the mast, you'll start to drop the angle. And so if you go too far though, that angle of attack will start sucking you down. The board won't, you'll really struggle to get release. So you kind of always want to get that angle just right so that once you get enough speed planing that the foil section engages and you'll just kind of come straight up. So
would you say that's it sounds like that could be an issue, like a good thing why you would choose Armstrong all the way? Yeah,
I mean, of course, like we tune that, our boards and our setups to be exactly like that. And that's where I think, if you've got a different brand board, you can always just base plate shim it. It's not it's a way around it. But I mean, yeah, it's tricky going between the two.
You have to realize that is the issue.
Yeah. And you hear a lot of people, they're like, I mean, Jens's setup with his Nash board was very nose down. So he'd probably have a similar issue trying to paddle up with an axis foil just because it'd lift a little early. So I mean, that is one reason to buy. I don't want to be the salesman, but I mean, yeah, it is a reason.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up, and then we can have a couple of more questions out there for sure. But we thanked Oskar a lot. Thanks a lot. It was amazing.